You've entered Bookstorm with Kristen Civiletto and me, Chris Storm. This is a podcast devoted to best-selling books that matter, books that make a difference. We're diving down deep with beloved authors about their stories. We're exposing hot-button topics and heartfelt themes, the issues that affect each of us in our own lives, as siblings, parents, partners, friends, as human beings. We're braving new ideas, fresh thoughts, hard lessons, and important truths. Those kinds of things that stay with us long after we turn the last page and close the book. Well, welcome back, Bookstorm Podcast listeners. I just have to give you a quick update. We now have loyal listeners in 54 countries, 50 states across the United States, and 850 cities, and we cannot thank you enough. We listen to you. We know that you want the latest, greatest, best-selling books and authors, and we have one here with us today that you're going to be delighted to hear. We have Anthony McCarten. Welcome, Anthony.
Hi there. Look, you guys are bigger than TikTok, I hear.
Well, much to our dismay, we are also on TikTok, and we just somewhat dread it, but we're still working that out. Check out our videos. We'll make one for you as well, Anthony. I want to tell our listeners a little bit about you, because that's sort of the fun behind an author. Anthony McCarten is a New Zealand-born novelist. He's a playwright, journalist, television writer, and four-time Academy Award-nominated filmmaker. You will know him by his films, The Theory of Everything, Darkest Hour, Bohemian Rhapsody, and The Two Popes. He produces motion pictures that entertain and inspire through the examination of some of history's most interesting people. Anthony received an Academy Award nominations for Best Adapted Screenplay for Theory of Everything and The Two Popes. He won 2 BAFTA awards. Notably, I have to mention the first 3 of his films won consecutive Oscars in the Best Actor category. Congratulations, and well-deserved, Anthony. Bohemian Rhapsody is the second highest grossing box office drama of all time after the Titanic. His work, The Darkest Hour, was #1 Sunday Times bestseller. And this book that we're here to talk to him about today, Going Zero, Kristen and I are going to make a prediction. We adore this book. I was hooked by the first page. This is going to be a bestseller. Let's see it made into a film. Anthony lives in London. Welcome to Bookstorm Podcast.
Delighted to speak with you.
Anthony, we give our listeners a little bit of the story behind the story that we're talking about, and we don't give away any spoilers. So if you want to add anything at the end, but if you'll allow me, I'd just like to tell our listeners about Going Zero. Fusion is a Silicon Valley company led by a tech genius, Cy Baxter. He's trying to secure a $90 billion contract to provide the federal government with some powerful new surveillance software. If this software works, it can find people anywhere in the world. Now, Fusion is about to go through a trial run with this software, or what's referred to as a beta test. And 10 Americans have been carefully selected to challenge this software. Their task, they have 2 hours to vanish when they get the notice, and then they have to evade detection for 30 days. There's a substantial monetary prize if they can do it. Now, one contestant, a very unassuming Boston librarian named Caitlin Day, for her, this contest is about much more than the money. In fact, it's deeply personal, and she puts it all on the line. Would you like to add anything to our summary? It's so hard not to give away spoilers in this one.
No, in fact, it's so erudite and so concise. I'd like a transcript so that when I'm asked what the book's about, I'll just quote you. That was very, very eloquent. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we will go ahead and you can kick us off over there, Chris.
I sure will. And I always love Kristen's summaries. And we've had authors say, will you come on book tour with me? And so she's always like, yes. So Anthony, as I said for our listeners, I really loved it. I devoured this book in one afternoon. I Want to Be Caitlin Day, Zero, number 10. The Fusion Go Zero team needed a good cross section of types and abilities to make it hard for themselves. Caitlin, and I want to quote this, has felt for a long time that she's somehow fallen through the social fabric and numbers herself among the unwanted, the exiles, the renegades of the underworld, the undesirable. We all feel that way sometimes. Who can't relate to Caitlin? We also have heard of these people throughout our history, these groundbreaking inventors and explorers and creators who always felt they were a little different than the average person. I loved that you created this character this way, as being a little quirky and unusual. Could you expand upon this character as the writer? Why did you create her that way? Because the reader is going to relate to her and love her. Is she fashioned after someone that or an experience you may have had, or why did you choose her to be this way?
Well, the needs of the story meant that I had to find someone who was a kind of every woman or an every person who would be underestimated, not only by the reader, but also by the characters in the novel who are in pursuit of her. And so I also needed her to be smart and a kind of bookish smart, which often doesn't translate into street smart. And so it was a pretty simple process of elimination to place her in a library. And so I then started to furnish her with emotional details, which were to make her entirely human and vulnerable, and not like a genre character, but someone very real, placed in a very real situation, circumstance, although unusual, not is one that I think we can all imagine. What would we do if we were challenged to go off grid and someone was after us? Where would we hide? It's sort of an extrapolation of the old game of hide and seek we all played as children. So I wanted her to be real. I wanted the fears to be real to her, but I wanted her to have a level of daring that even surprised her, and a level of cunning she didn't even know she had. Because, when I read like the stories coming out of Ukraine right now, heroism, it resides in the most unusual people. And often unless tested, you don't know whether you have it. So we all presume we might possess a certain level of heroism or cunning, or, but until we're really put in a situation where it's life and death, we have no way of knowing. So I wanted to take a woman who is revealing herself to us as the novel proceeds.
Mm-hmm. And you did just that. And I think that's why people are going to just connect to her, because I think we all, in reading this book, at least I know Kristen and I did, we asked ourselves, where would I hide? What would I do? We sort of followed behind Caitlin, rooting for her. And we were surprised sometimes at as you said, her cunning and her just street smarts, good old common sense. She had a lot of that too. I love everything that you made her to be.
Yeah, no, it sort of emerged out of a dinner party where in 2016 there was 4 or 5 friends. We're probably into our 3rd bottle of wine, and we were all sort of talking about a very common occurrence. I'm sure we've all had it, where our lives being so tech dominated, we were talking about how insidious some things are, like getting pop-up ads on your phone when you've just mentioned a product, and suddenly there's an ad for that product on your phone, and you go, no, it can't be. There's no way. No, this is just paranoia. But everybody around the table had similar experiences, and you start thinking, yes, our data is no longer our own. Our movements are no longer our own. The concept of privacy has completely been redefined, in this age in which we're living. We're kind of lab rats, and we're incredibly passive about it, because I think we're so awed by the tech, so sort of in love, enamored with it, that we're remiss in wanting to regulate it, at least the bad aspects of it. So all this started to sort of fuse in me and to telling a quite topical story, but with a thriller engine.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I want to dive into that a little bit with the technology. You have these very fascinating themes about the power of technology, but also an interesting theme about the limits of technology. I want to talk about that for a second. At times in your story, an actual human being had to figure something out in looking at the data, something the computer didn't see. And the algorithms can only predict so much, right? Because human behavior, we're fickle. We act contrary to our interests. Sometimes we don't even know what we're doing. And I thought it was very interesting that those traits will, I think, always set us apart, maybe from AI. And I was wondering if AI could ever account for the predictability or unpredictability of human beings.
I would like to think so. But how far into the future must we cast our imaginations? Who's to say in 100 years where this ends up? But certainly in the foreseeable future, there's a distinct difference between the technology that drives these chatbots and AIs and what drives us. We're memory devices. We're emotion devices. When we think, when we communicate, when we use language, we're not drawing on some sort of data block, which is giving predictions of the most likely outcomes or likely replies. I mean, in the word chatbot, it's a clever name. I mean, bots on their own would have sounded too sinister, I imagine, conjuring images of Terminator. But if they're only chatting, gee, what's the problem? So, and the actual real name for chatbots are LLMs, which are large language models. And essentially, what these machines are, and which distinguish themselves from us, is that they are simply machines that continuously predict which word will statistically most likely follow the previous one. It's based on crunching numbers. And so by definition, they aren't original. They're not original. So they deliver the most obvious results and the most commonly occurring. I hope we can say that we're not like that. We're not obvious. We confound ourselves. We are irrational. We're driven by emotion, thank God, which makes us sometimes unknowable to those closest in our lives, even, let alone ourselves. But it's the seed of creativity. So chatbots, they will never be Einstein, they will never be Picasso, they will never be Tolstoy. And they're not even remotely you and I.
Yeah, very well said. And I know we're starting to see news stories where, Chat GPT or another AI is starting to act inconsistent with what we would have predicted the AI would do. And it's causing a lot of consternation amongst people reading these articles.
Yeah, they will augment human activity, but they won't replace it.
Agreed.
That's the answer we all want to hear. We all want to believe that to be true. And I totally do. And I guess I love what you said, Anthony, that some of our very human weaknesses are also our strength. We're not predictable. We do change with emotion. And because there is no set rule in law, like you feed into a computer program, life just isn't that way. And I love that. I want to talk a little bit about this topic of privacy versus security. We see a lot of privacy in our world today, a lack of surveillance cameras, monitoring of computer activities, like you said, smartphone activities, locations, the Alexa, this Clear at the airport, microchips placed inside your pet now so you don't lose them. Your novel pushes this theory to an incredible level, and it caused the reader to pause and consider, would I trade my privacy for complete and total safety? I guess that's what we're getting at here. And what would I be surrendering in the process? I really thought long and hard about this. As the author, can you expand a little bit about your interest in this hot topic and your opinion about the danger and maybe the safety that it does offer?
Yeah, I think it's emerged as one of the issues in our time. It's certainly, in terms of human activity, we're in the middle of a revolution. It's transforming every aspect of our lives. And I think in the last 25 years, we have witnessed the slow encroachment of unregulated surveillance and covert influence. And it's the second aspect that I think is the most pressing, because I would almost say that privacy is a non-issue anymore. We don't have it. people without our knowledge, people we've never met, possess or could possess, have access to information about us that will predict our next gesture. This is never in the course of human history has this been the case. So let's just assume something. Let's say privacy is a done deal. We gave that up when we clicked and bought the last Amazon product. And we are clicking away those natural rights, and because we're in a race to open a newspaper article or something, and a window pops up, and we don't read the fine print. So let's assume that's all gone. I think the most malign new field where there needs to be immediate regulation is in undue influence, because now we are being inculcated and influenced almost subconsciously, and it's so clever that we don't even know that our choices and our opinions are being molded by people with commercial instincts. I think it's almost impossible to deny that that's going on. The replacement of independent thought and judgment with automated systems of control and behavior manipulation. That is so sci-fi and creepy, but it's happening every day. And we're seeing how, that because we're being so passive and there's very little regulation going on, that we're living in a time of increased radicalization, brutishness, misinformation, extreme porn, obsessions with body image, bullying, online trolling, and any number of tech-related perils. So, what we regulate food, we regulate drugs. Why do we do that? So that we can stem anything that would be injurious to a human being. Why are we so passive with technology? I know that the conversation is rising. There are bills being drafted, in the Senate or Congress. But they face a very uphill battle because capitalism usually wins. But I think we need to get very exercised about the subject. Having said all of that, this book is not a soapbox. It's not preaching any particular point of view, but I hope it's just looking a little bit further in the future to make us aware of some of the challenges, that we will be facing.
And let me say to our readers, it's true. This book is completely and totally also very entertaining. I couldn't stop turning the pages, and you're opening your eyes to things I wasn't even aware of. It's a lot of fun reading this book too. But Kristen and I also believe a real good fiction is based on something in this real world. And so you can, as a reader, relate to it, consider, maybe learn something, maybe grow in our own way or change in our own way. And I think these are things that this novel definitely does. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, in fact, I'd like to pick up right there, because one of the most fun aspects for me were these characters and the depth that you drew them. I thought that was fantastic. In fact, I loved seeing them act in ways that were consistent with their internal struggles. And one of your characters in particular, I'm not going to say which one, was very interesting because he essentially tried to live in a cyber world. He used images of the outdoors, including Niagara Falls, where I'm from, instead of an actual vista out his window. He would use VR technology in order to visit certain places instead of going there himself. And even when he was visiting some of those places, he was kind of uncomfortable by the homey touches that he was seeing while he was there. It was almost like he was recoiling from it. And I thought it was an interesting exploration of his character, because he was trying to push away the real world, the messy human emotion world, and replace it with something that he could control, this technology, or at least he thought he could control it. And I was wondering if you think that this is another issue that we should be concerned about, where people are using the cyber world and a virtual reality to supplant real human experience and human connection.
Undoubtedly, it's happening. Yeah, the opportunity that technology now avails, which is to entirely curate your own world, is so tempting that very few are able to resist it if given the choice. And certainly the young COVID did us no favors, by the way. The lockdown and those 2 years where kids they were forced to go into these artificial realities and stuff and derive whatever normal real life pleasures they could from technology. And that's a bit of an addiction that is an exaggerated form of what we're all undergoing. We don't suffer the same extremes. We're not probably tempted to in the same ways this character is. But this character you're referring to wants to control his world, wants to curate every aspect of it. And technology, if that's your choice, if that's your, if that turns you on, then the opportunities are just growing every day to do so. That's part of the revolution I was referring to earlier on. And you don't need to be an anthropologist to say that this is an entirely different form of human activity, of interacting with the world.
Yeah. And you have to wonder, does it satisfy? Because at the end of the day, I think we don't know all the answers, but we certainly see where people are pushing the boundaries of more and more excitement, more thrills, going deeper into that realm. And so, there's so much there.
And there's also a requisite laziness that attends that, because when you're not going out and learning the hard way, when you're not going out and experiencing, travel, which is 90% anxiety and 10% magical moments, anxiety makes the 10% even more richer, when you've been on a shitty bus all day to get to see some temple. The temple glows ever more brightly and contains a kind of spiritual power that it would otherwise not have held. So if someone just drops you into the temple, it's just a temple, and that flattening of human experience is a deeply sad thing. But the more it's offered on a plate to us, it's very hard to resist. So hopefully storytelling, analog books, turning pages, they will not be replaced. And, we need to fight the good fight.
Absolutely. And, we also hope for the good aspects to be more pronounced, and that is the inspiration that can come from technology and media. In fact, I will share this with you. I hadn't told Chris this, but my son and we had watched your Darkest Hour, one of your movies. And now we're going on a World War II trek in Europe, which I'm very excited about, but that inspired him to want to know more. And to me, that's where literature and media and things can have this positive and beneficial effect, but it can't replace it.
No. And we're being very squeezed in that area too. Would I get Darkest Hour made today? It's sorry.
No worries.
Yes, well, no, it's finding, when did I make that? About 8 years ago. If I went to market with that right now, they might say, well, that's there's less and less appetite for something, history based like that. So but we keep trying. We try and put really good, interesting material out there.
And that's what you did with this, with Going Zero. So for our listeners, you're going to want to get this book, Going Zero by Anthony McCarten. You're going to want to crawl right in. And what I started to do through the whole thing is try to figure out, where would I hide? And I have to tell you, Anthony, you got me, because I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I had this plan. And sure enough, I think it was number 6 or 7 had the same plan as me. And I'm like, you got me. That's what that. And of course, they can't say what happened to them, but it was fun in the background trying to figure out how we might be able to beat this game. Lots of fun. Anthony, can you give us a clue before we let you go? What are you going to be working on next?
I'm working with Yoko Ono, producing one of the great love stories of the 20th century, the John and Yoko story. So we have all of John and Yoko's music, and I can't wait to tell that story because I think it's timely. It's about the search for peace, inner and outer.
That sounds
excellent.
So wonderful. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here with us today. We thoroughly enjoyed this Going Zero novel. All the best to you. We can't wait to see how this book is going to take off. That's our prediction. We're going to market it everywhere. And thanks so much for joining Bookstorm Podcast.
Thank you so much. Bless you both. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Yeah, I love talking to Anthony McCarten, Kristen. This just opens such a incredible amount of thought-provoking material of where is our future headed with artificial intelligence. About 2 weeks ago, there was a big article in the New York Times that talked about that GPT chat. And I don't know if everyone saw it, some of our listeners, but this computer was pretending or claiming to have emotions and connections to human beings. And they said, he said, well, but we are in love with each other, but you broke up with me. Well, I cheated on you. Well, and it really frazzled people and shocked them, I think a little out of fear. Can AI become human? This is our bottom line here. And as Anthony just said, and as we want to believe, no possible way. I say no possible way because humans are unpredictable. We don't even know what we're going to do given a certain situation. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only are we unpredictable, but sometimes we act contrary to even our own self-interest. We throw it all on the line for love. We go to war. These are things that don't make logical sense. And I don't know that AI will ever be able to replace that element, that creativity, for example, that Anthony was talking about. So it's fascinating. I think the future is here. There's no doubt. And that's one of the things I loved about this book, because not only was it a thrill ride, and it is a page turner. There were times when I laughed out loud, but it also really brings home for us, what are we doing? As a society, as people, we've got to be on the alert. And I think something he alluded to in this conversation, interesting idea of action. So been occupied with over here, seeing exactly what is really going on in terms of our privacy and things that we cannot get back.
I really could relate to what Anthony said about his cell phone, that you may be talking about a topic and the next thing you know, you have several ads. This happens to me all the time. I have the Alexa. I love the Alexa in my house. I unplug it sometimes. I read a case where there was a crime in a home and the Alexa was on. And of course, they could not reveal what they heard because there's a privacy issue with that. So if that's listening all the time, this is a frightening subject. If I can't drive from here to the grocery store without 10 cameras picking me up along the way, that's terrifying. If I'm giving my eye pupil recognition at the clear at the airport to let myself in, that's scary. If I put a chip inside my dog so my dog can never go missing, I thought of this about 10 years ago. What if we put a chip inside every child? What's the trade-off? Your child will never go missing. They'll never be kidnapped. As an adult, you will know where everyone is at any given minute. A crime's committed, you track the chip, you see who was at that location at that exact time. But what do we have to forfeit? Or as Anthony said, maybe we already are forfeiting in terms of privacy to achieve that security. Is it worth it? I'm going to go out on a limb and say, no, it's not worth it. I think I'd rather have the privacy.
I know, but I think we have to look at it as a balance, because the threats we face today are very real. Let's be honest, we have enemies across the world. We have enemies within our own ranks. We have horrific things that we saw even just this week in the news. If we have the technology and the power to predict those behaviors, to stop somebody, we've got to weigh that against not taking action when we have the technology and the means to do so.
Yes.
And I think that's where that balance and that trade-off is, that is very alarming and is different for each person as they engage in that analysis.
Yes, absolutely. When it comes to terrorism, we need to employ all these efforts, but where does the terrorist surveillance stop? And where does the everyday human being just trying to live their lives begin? And it's a very dangerous gray line. But as Anthony brought up, that's not totally what this book's about, readers. It's really fun. So if you could get $3 million and you could disappear for 30 days without being picked up by all this surveillance equipment, and wait till you read this book, because there's things out there that I wasn't even aware of. Where would you go to hide? And I'm not going to tell you where I was going, but he figured me out right away. It's a lot of fun. Where were you going to hide, Kristen? Same as me, or somewhere different?
Yeah, I was thinking about wherever it was the most wild. But then I was thinking there's other enemies and things you'd have to be careful of there as well. But for me, it would be somewhere in a cave.
Oh, when you
And
said most wild, I wasn't sure if you meant like New York City nightlife or something. You meant
I
off in
think
the
I might
woods
stand
somewhere.
out.
Well, I just got to give a shout out to you know who, our incredibly talented sound engineer and producer, the Mr. Mark Carey. If here he is right here. Thanks so much, Mark. We've had well, at least 2 crises here today that Mark solved like in an instant, and we're so grateful to this guy.
Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again. Have a good one.
If you're watching us on YouTube, you're going to see we look a little different. And I'm sorry to say, we're not going to be filming at the same location anymore. We're going to be coming to you actually from 2 different states, which is pretty cool. We're going to be in New York. We're going to be in North Carolina. So we're spreading it out a little. If you're listening to us on Podcast World, you're not even going to know the difference, but we're still here. And guess what we're going to be bringing to you this spring? We've got David Baldacci, Simply Lies, Susan Meissner, Only the Beautiful, Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray with The First Ladies, Crispo Jollian, The Lioness. We have Madeline Martin, The Keeper of Hidden Books, Bryn Turnbull, Paris Deception, Katie Quinn and Janie Chang, The Phoenix Crown, Heather Goodenkoff, The Overnight Guest, Ellie Banks, aka Maisie Yates, One Little Spark, Matthew Quirk, Inside Threat, and we got to hold off now because we've got so many books coming that we love. We don't even have any more time left.
I know we have quite the lineup. And listeners, as Chris mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we have so many listeners all over the world. We are thrilled and we're very grateful. We're very humble. And we just ask that you continue to share our socials, share the links, especially if it's an author that you love and a discussion that you really enjoyed. And I think that Anthony might agree with this. I don't want to speak for him, but this kind of healthy discussion is really what's needed. We've got to look at what's going on in society and things that are coming down the pike and talk about them and evaluate and think about them in different ways. So we ask that you stay on the radar with Bookstorm. You can visit us on our website at bookstormpodcast.com. You can find us on TikTok, on Instagram, and Twitter. And also you can go to YouTube and you can see us and our amazing authors just by searching Bookstorm and Podcast. Until next time, one of the best ways to brave the storm is to dive down deep into life-changing fiction.